Hi, I'm Abigail. I'm here to talk about photography, how I relate to it, and how I can help you get those incredible photos you love for a lifetime. I've been talking a lot about art and creativity recently, and I felt like I kind of wanted to turn it into more of a conversation. So what I did is I put some questions up on my Instagram story recently, and I had people interact with it. And today I'm going to talk about what the results from the polls and the question stickers that I put up on Instagram. I'm going to discuss a few of them, might not get to all of them, and just give my opinion also on what they were. I've looked at some of them, I haven't read them all, so let's dive in. Okay, so the first poll was, do you think photography is art? And there were three options. You could say yes, absolutely, not really, and it's complicated. So it looks like most people said yes, absolutely, and I'm happy that this is the kind of following that I have. One person says it's complicated, but almost 100% agree, yes, absolutely, photography is art. And I spoke about this specifically in, I don't know if it was the previous video but recently. Like I said, it's something I've been talking about a lot. I do think photography is art. I also think that certain types of photography don't have to be art. And I dove into this whole thing. I think it was a two-part video that I did actually. And so yes, I think I might lend a little bit toward it's complicated personally, but I do think photography is art. And if you're looking at like generalization, yes, you can say photography is art. If you dive into more specific areas of different styles and types of photography, you might go into maybe or no, but for the most part, photography is definitely an art. And even though it has become incredibly digital, I think it is in many ways an art on the level of things of paintings and sketching and things. And the same as with that, you can make it complicated and you've got different mediums that you can work with. In photography is the same. You have film photography, you have incredible levels of editing that you can dive into, or you can keep it super simple and really just take what comes directly out of your camera. And that's especially with things like phone photography and stuff where you might not edit a lot. So yeah, I think photography is art. Alright, next question I had was, does something have to be beautiful to be considered art? And the options were yes, it has to be beautiful to be considered art, sometimes, or no, it does not have to be beautiful to be considered art. And so 20% voted sometimes art needs to be beautiful. 80% said no, art does not have to be beautiful to be considered art. And I think it's true. I agree with the 80%. This is what I'm trying to say. Art does not have to be beautiful to be considered art. I think it goes back to that saying of beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And I think if you have a certain appreciation for art, you will find it beautiful, but people don't have to find it beautiful for it to be art. Art in itself is a form of expression, which I think stands apart from beauty. Art is often beautiful, and I think to some people more than others, but again, it's not a prerequisite. I want to say it's kind of like an added bonus, or something that you can, like I said, find appreciation in. And so I want to tie that in with photography being art. I think so many people consider photography as it has to look beautiful, it has to look polished, it has to look perfect. But if photography is art, which I definitely consider it to be art, the same applies to photography. Photography does not have to be beautiful. And so many times I see people trying way too hard when they're taking photos. And absolutely, like as your skill increases you probably are going to have better looking photos, and as you practice more or you are photographed more, you're going to have better looking photos. But I think so much more important than making sure your photo looks perfect or that it is quote unquote beautiful is to make sure that it is authentic, or to make sure that it captures the essence of what you're trying to capture. I think those things are by far more important than making a beautiful photo. And so relating that if photography is art, and art doesn't have to be beautiful to be considered art. Photography doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be beautiful. It can be very raw. It can be very unpolished, very, in some cases, ugly. I think some of the ugly photos are the most breathtaking photos in many cases. It's the things like, I personally love documentary photography. And I mean, I love so many styles of photography, but one of the things that I love about documentary photography, and especially if you go into things of like a documentary wedding photographer, for instance, there is just such beauty to me in those moments which are completely unpolished, and the things, taking specifically this example of weddings, the things that you wouldn't imagine to put in your photo album from your wedding. You know, what you think of, especially when it comes to traditional wedding photos, are everyone standing and like in a line or in a group, or you have the ceremony photos or whatever, and everything's kind of in place. Everything is aligned, everything's in a pattern, everything is fixed to perfection. You know, everybody's smiling, all the dresses are in place, all of the hair is put in place, you know. But the pictures that I fall in love with are the one-of-a-kind pictures, and the ones that wouldn't necessarily be considered beautiful, and wouldn't be thought of as this perfect photo. I think those are so much more significant, and in many cases I would consider them much more an artistic piece than the photo that looks like every other photo that you've seen in a wedding album. To have those documentary style photos, and this is just one type of photography and it's not everything, but what I'm trying to say is photography doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be even beautiful. It can be rugged. I've talked about this before in a video, I don't remember exactly which one, I'll go back and have a look at it. But I've talked about how you mustn't allow your environment to stop you from taking pictures. You mustn't take, let's say you live in a house or an apartment or wherever you live, and you kind of feel like it's not presentable enough to have a photo shoot there. You're like, it's very plain, it's very ordinary, or maybe it's not that put together. I think that those places have so much potential for art, and it relates to this thing of art doesn't have to be beautiful, it has to be meaningful. So yeah, anyway, I'm gonna move on to the next story, the next question that I posted, because I don't want to spend too much time there. So the next one is, I asked the question, what makes something iconic? And I allowed you guys to respond. So one response that I got was, it should be worthy of veneration. Now, to be honest, I kind of know what veneration means, but I had to go look it up to make sure I completely understood what this was. I love that you did use this word, actually. So a definition for those like me who wasn't entirely sure what this meant. Veneration is a noun meaning great respect or reverence. And so it should be worthy of veneration. What makes something iconic? I love that. It's kind of, I think, the most naturally assumed definition of iconic. And we love to talk about things that are iconic in our opinions, especially when either a celebrity or a friend or somebody does something and you're like, wow, that was iconic. Or like you talk about like some memory or whatever reminiscing you're doing, and you talk about how iconic it is. Or maybe there's a couple that you know and you're like, they're just super iconic together or so. But yeah, worthy of veneration, you know, something that you kind of respect a lot in a sense. Another person responded, like it having and keeping a moment in time, that when people look and think about it, and this continues, they are filled with excitement and inspiration. And I love this one too, especially the inspiration part, but the excitement too, and just having a place in time, a moment in time. You know, something iconic is something that won't be forgotten, something that stays with you, and something that becomes an icon. And that's also relating again to the term iconic, and I'll read to you just like a dictionary definition of what iconic means. So the Merriam-Webster dictionary defines iconic as of relating to or having the characteristics of an icon, or widely recognized and well established, also as widely known and acknowledged, especially for distinctive excellence. And so I think it all kind of ties in together. It's something that stands out from the rest, and it's something that is remembered, something that becomes an icon. And so I think it's kind of the thing that you use as a standard to measure other things against as well. It's something which is unique and special. And I love this term, and why I brought it into the discussion is because I think a lot of photography may not be beautiful, and a lot of art may not be beautiful, but it is iconic. And so how do you aim to have iconic photographs rather than being limited by having just beautiful photographs or good looking photographs, or whatever, even aesthetic photographs? We are so wrapped up in this world of having aesthetic looking everythings, or a specific aesthetic that comes through in your photos or whatever, but trying to rather aim at being iconic in how you take your photos and what photos you take, what your photos look like, than trying to have a certain aesthetic or trying to have a beautiful photo. And why I like the term iconic and I prefer that over trying to achieve a beautiful photo is because an icon defines itself. Beauty is defined by whatever the audience or whatever group surrounds it. And yeah, to be recognized as an icon takes external recognition, it requires that, but people who are the most iconic, at least in my opinion, are the people that set their own standards, the people that express themselves in their own ways, that aren't contained or restricted or limited to any standards that have been put on them. They create that themselves. So to me, I think it's way, way more important to try and achieve an iconic photo, and not to put that pressure on yourself, but to actually use that as a way of taking pressure off yourself. You don't have to look beautiful. You don't have to look according to any aesthetic. You can look your own self, and I think being your own self is the most iconic thing that you can do. So then going to the next question that I had, I asked, how important is art and creativity? And the three options I gave was not that important, important but not as much as some things, and most important thing in the world. So this one was a 50-50 split between important but not as much as some things and most important thing in the world. And I don't know which one I honestly would choose. I want to say it's the most important thing in the world, and I've also talked about this again in previous videos. In many ways, I think it is vital to everything, and it's one of those things where if you truly appreciate art, if you're someone who really, really gets it, then you will genuinely be willing to sacrifice anything to actually appreciate and be able to interact with art. And as an example, it's the thing of, well, I mean, maybe a bit of a morbid example, but it's the trope of the starving artist, you know? They sacrifice everything for art, specifically their own art, but it's this absolute love and drive and just hunger for art to the point where they sacrifice everything. And yes, obviously the goal is to be successful, and I don't think that you need to be a starving artist in order to appreciate art. I actually don't think that you should be a starving artist. I think artists should be more appreciated, and there's no reason, like, I don't think that if you are a failing artist or a financially not successful artist, it makes you any more of an artist. I also don't think it makes you less of an artist to say that, but I don't think that's the goal. And in a different example, you know, you have people who will live a lifestyle where they have a very plain, simple lifestyle. Like, they don't necessarily buy expensive clothes, they don't go to expensive restaurants, etc. But what they will spend their money on is going to, maybe they really enjoy theater, which is a form of art, and part of the arts. So they would go to theater, like acting and plays and maybe even music or all these things. And maybe somebody who really appreciates movies, that's a form of art. So they spend their money on that. Or inversely, it's someone who doesn't necessarily have a large salary, but they really, really appreciate the art of fashion. And so they live a very simple life outside of that. Maybe they have a very small flat that they live in. They don't have a lot of furniture. They have very plain things, but they really focus on having a nice, curated wardrobe. And I think a lot of people will look at that, and when you don't appreciate art, you can easily criticize it and ridicule it, and you're like, yeah, well, you're wasting your money on these things, you should what, or you should save up, or these. But I think that what that gives you, the value that it adds to your life, to be able to appreciate art in that way, to sacrifice one thing in order to appreciate art to a greater extent, that is something that only if you truly appreciate art can you understand. And it's something that I think so many people miss out on, and it's so sad to see, because that appreciation, like, those are the people that love life, in my opinion. Like, you need to love either experiences or art or something externally to be able to love that appreciation of something. And it includes, it's like a lot of cultures appreciate art, but they don't call it that. Whether that's culinary arts or simple fashion. Like, when I say simple fashion, it's not something that's necessarily plain, but like everyday fashion. Like, everybody in this culture wears bright colors, or everyone in this culture wears a certain style of clothing, more traditional clothing, and appreciating that, dressing up for events, throwing parties, celebrating things. I think all of that relates to the arts, music, all of these things. And the cultures and the peoples that tend to be the happiest and the ones that enjoy and appreciate life the most are the ones that appreciate and look up to the arts the most. The more rigid, the more the less expressive people are, the less they're able to appreciate life. And so, yeah, I think art is incredibly, incredibly important. And it would be hard for me to find things that I think are more important in life than art. And that doesn't mean that art needs to take up all of your life, but having some element of art in your life or appreciating art in some way is incredibly important. And the last one that I asked was, why is art important? And some of the responses that I got from this, the first response was, they stand out to be remarkable and memorable, something you won't forget. And it's true, art, I think, does stand out in a way of being memorable because it is beyond our everyday. And in that, it is really beautiful to have art as a part of your everyday, because otherwise life just passes you by and you really don't appreciate or enjoy the time that you have. And I think that's so, so sad. the key to actually making time stand still is being present in the moment. And one of the easiest and one of the best ways I've found to be in the moment is to engage in art, either creating art or viewing art or both. So in that sense, I think, yes, art is amazing. And I kind of just took that all into one direction. But let me go into the next one. I think I went a little off track there, so let me go back to the next reason that was sent. I'm not sure if I fully understand this, but I'm just going to read it how it's written. We are art, and all throw up some kind of art in our general lives. But when we sit down and throw it into a medium, we showcase humanity and our emotion and mind and process. It's a puzzle piece of life. Yeah, I think that's definitely true. And it comes to the thing of appreciating art versus just letting it pass you by. So yeah, we are art, and we create art whether we mean to or not. However, if we are intentional about it, it becomes so much more meaningful and so much more a piece of a bigger puzzle. I think that's really cool, actually. Really great perspective. Because it comes back to, I talked about meaning in life in a previous video, and I said that creating art might not be your specific meaning, like that fulfills you entirely, but if you do not create art or you do not appreciate art, you will never be able to fully find your meaning in life or appreciate the meaning in life. And I think that definitely relates to that, and I think that's really cool. So yeah, I love the talk about what art is and photography and art and things like that, but if there's one thing I want to just kind of focus at the end of this video is remember that your art and your life, and if you ever have a professional photo shoot or if you're just casually taking pictures on your own, it doesn't have to be perfect, it doesn't have to be beautiful. It is art. You are art. And capturing and appreciating that is the most important thing. And so give yourself the freedom, give yourself the opportunity, go out, take more pictures, have more pictures taken of you, and allow it to be art, allow it to be iconic, rather than trying to force it into a certain box of either an aesthetic or trying to look beautiful according to some standard, and really just let the art flow out of you. So yeah, hope that changes a little bit about your perspective of art and photography. And let me know what you guys think, if there's more you'd like to add, or maybe something that you disagree with. I'd love to hear it.